Hello and welcome to this edition of Wineskins, a program that features reflections on the lives of the saints and sacred scriptures, along with information on topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm Father Jim Korda. Wineskins is brought to you by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview Detective Delphine Baldwin-Casey on child sexual abuse. We will also look at the life of St. Charles Borromeo, as well as reflections on the readings for this 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. That and more coming up on Wineskins. In our current issue, I will speak with Paul Jarazembowski. Joining me again is Paul Jarazembowski, who is the National Coordinator for Youth and Young Adults for the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. Paul, it was a pleasure to have you on Wineskins, and it's a pleasure to have you back again.
Thank you.
You know, when you were here the last time, we talked primarily about young adults, but also you mentioned the Pope's exhortation, Christ is alive. I'd like to talk today about World Youth Day. We know that many young adults here in our diocese participate in that and have over the years. Talk about the last one that was, I believe, in Panama. What was your experience and how alive is the church for young adults?
You know, the World Youth Day experiences for the past, 40-some years that they've been happening have been really a lifeblood for the Catholic Church. My job in particular is to be able to accompany the bishops from the United States who then accompany their pilgrims to World Youth Day and to Panama and then Krakow and Rio and all those cities before it. So I get to watch how the bishops get to see just how rejuvenated the church is at that gathering. There's a buzz in the streets. You walk around Panama or Krakow or wherever the World Youth Day host city is that particular year, and there's a sense of openness. There's a sense of just joy. You watch as people walk through the streets singing songs or trading, maybe some goods with people who, hey, we've got some crosses from our country. Can we have holy cards from your country? They talk to the shopkeepers and the residents, just thanking them for their hospitality. And then in turn, sometimes the local people, say, here's some food for you. There's just a great bit of energy and buzz that's in the city. And that's even before the Holy Father gets there. Because even though the Holy Father, whether it's John Paul II, Benedict, or Francis, come to the host city, really it's not about him. I mean, it's really about the community of the church gathered around Christ in a universal way. And the Pope shows up too. And you can really tell that because the energy of the young adults who are at World Youth Day is such where there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of excitement about being Catholic, what possibilities we can do together for the world. So there's a lot of energy in that space. And then when the Holy Father comes, he really just kind of puts the exclamation point on that international gathering.
And I would imagine that energy is really contagious too. We watch it on television here at the station, but being there, I would imagine that electricity and that vibrancy is just so much alive. What can we, more seasoned Catholics, learn from our young Catholics about the faith and about Jesus and about the church?
Pope Francis talks in his recent exhortation, Christus Vivit, he talks about how when he became Pope, there was a certain grace that the Holy Spirit gave him, that he felt like a young person again. And even if you look at pictures of Pope Francis after he was made the Holy Father and before, you can tell that there was a youthfulness that came over him. And I think for me, as I've gone to World Youth Day since 1993 when I was young and have gone since, and even as I age each year, even as I watch the bishops as they walk with their pilgrims and as I walk with other adults, World Youth Day is a challenge to all of us to regain our youthfulness, to regain our hope. It fills us with a feeling that the ultimate end of any story is the resurrection, its victory, and that there's hope. And I think that I would always challenge anyone who's a more seasoned Catholic to relive again their youthfulness when they listen to the Holy Father, because he's not just speaking to young people today, but I think he's speaking to the young hearts that are in all of us. And I think if all of us are inspired by those words, I think we can all do the great things that I think he hopes the young people will do through World Youth Day.
What would you tell the young people in our diocese about the church and about participating and about being a witness to us?
A lot of young people today are struggling. One of the things I've noticed is that a lot of young people today are overwhelmed with their anxiety, their work, economics, relationship issues, self-identity issues. And I would tell them that The church does care. The church does want to walk with you. We want to journey with you. We want to listen to you. Speak to us, move us, inspire us. I would echo Pope Francis's, his last words in his exhortation to the young people was, and if you get to a destination before we do, please have the patience to wait for us. We will catch up, we will accompany you, and we will be with you in the end.
Certainly words of wisdom. Where could we find more information about those particular documents, especially that exhortation, Christus Vivus?
Sure. The Vatican website has it, and a very easy URL is synod2018.va.
Paul Jarazembowski, thanks again for gracing us with your presence here on Wineskins, and God bless you in your work and ministry with the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops.
Thank you very much.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. Tomorrow, the Church celebrates the feast of St. Charles Borromeo. To tell us more is Pam Pasquale. She is from St. Charles Church in Boardman.
St. Charles Borromeo died in Milan on November 3, 1584, was canonized in 1610, and inscribed in the Roman calendar in 1613. He was born of a noble family and graduated at the age of 21 with doctorates in both canon and civil law. He was ordained to the priesthood at the age of 24 and was immediately called to Rome to serve in the Vatican, where he held several high offices. His uncle, Pope Pius IV, named him a cardinal and Archbishop of Milan. His time serving the Church of God was also a time of religious wars being waged in France, the Netherlands, and in England. In his own diocese of Milan, Charles reformed several religious institutes, and during the plague of 1576, he established hospitals and hospices for the victims. At the age of 46, he passed from this life. The example of St. Charles is still relevant today, especially in regards to his dedication to his pastoral ministry and devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. In his sermon at the last synod he attended, he urged the clergy to strive that all that they might do be a work of love. These were his words to them. This is the way we can easily overcome the countless difficulties we have to face day after day, which, after all, are part of our work. In mediation, we find the strength to bring Christ to birth in ourselves and in others. For Wineskins, I'm Pam Pasquale.
Welcome back to our show, Promise to Protect, Pledge to Heal. Joining me now is Delphine Baldwin-Casey. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
You know, the question that I had asked my previous guests is a question that I'd like to ask you. Clergy sexual abuse affects all of us. How does it affect you personally, but also as a layperson working in the church?
It's something that sometimes I struggle with, no matter what my profession is. And all the years that I served on the Youngstown Police Department, the hardest cases for me were child abuse. I mean, it's very difficult to watch kids that are abused, especially by people they love and trust. Right. So it affects you.
Let's kind of define child abuse. Give us like the age that we're talking about and what type of abuse are we really dealing with?
Child abuse can be defined as the physical maltreatment or sexual molestation of a child. But when we speak of child, we talk about someone who is under the age of 18. And if that person is physical or mentally impaired, it can be up until the age of 21.
When we talk about child abuse, especially within the church, which is why we're having this discussion, what are the procedures that someone like yourself or the church should take when they hear of an allegation?
Well, when there's an allegation of child abuse, Most institutions should know the proper way to report it. So if a child reports an abuse, it's 3 ways that you can do it. The first way would be through Children's Services. You would want to report that abuse to them. That's one of the boards I'm proud to say that I do serve on. The other way could be through Jobs and Family Services. You can report it that way. And of course, you can definitely call your local police.
How important is it for us to be very upfront, especially in our reporting of what we hear that could be credible allegations?
Well, during my years of investigation, when someone reports a crime to me, I like to make that person feel that I believe what they're saying. That is very important, so that person will open up to you, that person will trust you. Because one of the things that I truly feel, the worst abuse of any victim is their silence. So you want to be able to communicate to that person where they will open up to you.
One of the things that you had mentioned prior to the taping is that sometimes when someone who has been abused finally opens up about it, it's oftentimes years later. Why is that repression so much part of this terrible problem?
And I'm glad that you asked that question. That's probably the number one question that I'm asked. Why does it take a victim so long to come forward? There are many reasons, and what might be a reason for one person might not be the other. Sometimes there's that fear that was instilled in them as a child. If they tell, what will happen? The other one would be they might not be believed. There are many cases where a child has come forward, and because of the relationship to the person with the abuse, such as a family member, or it could be a clergy person, sometimes parents are not willing to believe what the child has said.
That whole sense of believing children is, I would think, difficult for some adults, but I think in this world that we live in, and because of, unfortunately, some of the things that happen, we need to take that stance where we do believe them, not only for their welfare, but for their future as well.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about what is credible. What makes an allegation credible? Because I would imagine in your work, that sometimes could be difficult.
It can be, but one of the things that we do as detectives or investigators, we go through training for when we're interviewing and knowing the difference between interviews and interrogation. So since for a long time that I've been more on the victim's advocate side, I do more of an interview with victims. I don't make them feel uncomfortable. I don't make them feel like I'm interrogating them or I felt like they are lying or have committed a crime. And in some cases, in the back of my mind, I probably know they did commit the crime, but it's just the way that you ask a person question. So when you're dealing with children, there's just ways that you have to ask them questions, and you want to be more indirect instead of saying, did your father do that? And you might say something like, okay, well, just tell me what happened when you were talking, to your father, or something like that. So there's ways to do things.
And I would imagine sometimes children might be more willing to talk to somebody that might not be a family member because of whatever reason, whether they might be embarrassed or just can't deal with that. So your role as someone who not only is trained but compassionately listens to them is going to be important.
Absolutely, and as they say, out of the mouths of babes. All right? There's so much truth when you listen to what children have to say.
Let's talk briefly about that whole sense of being vulnerable. We know that young children, in our experience, are rather impressionable. Going back to our own childhood, we looked up to certain people, and especially our parents and loved ones. And how important is it to be sensitive to children because of their vulnerability.
That's very important because the vulnerability for children are definitely the people they trust, okay? And the one thing you don't want to make them feel ashamed that they've done something wrong, all right? And that's a very sensitive area. Even when you're discussing what they tell you about the person that has abused them. So for instance, if I'm working on a case, and let's say the child tells me it's the clergy person, they're very sensitive to that. They're still asking themselves, what did they do wrong? What did they say wrong? And why did this happen to me? So children are very vulnerable.
Delphine Baldwin-Casey, unfortunately our time is up, but we thank you for your presence on our show today, but also for the work that you do, especially for the most vulnerable among us, and thank you for your help and assistance.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you. For more information and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Many sisters, brothers, and religious order priests served for little pay, and now their communities lack retirement funds.
I spent 34 years as a teacher.
I just loved interacting with the students.
Gifts to the Retirement Fund for Religious help provide for medications, nursing care, and more. An annual collection is held in parishes across the nation.
I always remember you in my prayers.
Please give to those who have given a lifetime. Visit retiredreligious.org.
Church World Service believes that being self-reliant is a joy everyone should share. So around the block or around the world, share the joy.
Hi, I'm Mark Quinn. As I grew up on the south side of Chicago, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield not only taught me, but formed me in my Catholic faith. I owe them so much. That's why I make an annual donation to the Retirement Fund for Religious. Do you remember the religious men and women who shaped your life? Say thank you to them by donating to the Retirement Fund for Religious at your local parish. Join me, share in the care.
The song we have for you today is from the CD called Worship the Lord. It is by Colleen and Hannah Heldreth and Christina Parthemer.
What should I do when I count all my blessings and God the Father keeps sending me more? What shall I offer of all of my treasure? How can I please Him whom angels adore? Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Enter His courts with shadows of evening, when steps are slow and my strength almost gone, what will I say when I kneel in His presence? What shall I do when my journey is done? Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. Enter His courts with thanksgiving and praise. Honor and glory and power and blessing give to Jehovah, the Ancient of Days. Thou art worthy, thou art worthy, thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory, glory and honor, glory and honor and power. For thou hast created, hast all things created. Thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they are created. Thou art worthy, O Lord. Thou art worthy, O Lord.
And now I'll share with you some reflections on the readings for the 31st Sunday in Ordinary Time. I believe that there's a problem today in the way we use the word salvation. In the minds and on the lips of many people, that word speaks of nothing but a fire escape from hell and a one-way ticket to heaven. And in between, it has little or nothing to do with life. I don't know where the idea got started, but I am absolutely certain it cannot be traced back to the New Testament. In today's Gospel reading, we have an example of what salvation meant to Christ. Recall the story of Zacchaeus, who was the tax collector that climbed the sycamore tree so as to get a better view of Jesus. In the story, Jesus said, "Come down, Zacchaeus, I'm going home with you." I have an idea that Zacchaeus was very nervous and anxious about that, yet he must have felt very privileged that he was heading home with Jesus at his side. They had dinner together that night. We don't know what they talked about, but we do know the results of that visit. Something happened to Zacchaeus, and Jesus called that something salvation. There was nothing magical about it. It was just a relationship. The young prophet of the Galilee reached out to the tax collector of Jericho. The tax collector responded with an open home, an open heart, and an open mind. Zacchaeus shared his food with Jesus. Jesus shared his life with Zacchaeus. In short, they became friends. And that friendship made a difference in the life of Zacchaeus, which he could not even explain. That's what salvation means. It is a life-changing experience which almost always happens through relationships. Today's gospel story is a profound illustration of the transforming power of relationships. It can happen between anyone. Best of all, it can happen between us and Jesus. You and I, of course, cannot see Jesus with our physical eyes as Zacchaeus did. We can, however, cultivate an awareness of his presence. We can open our minds to his truth. We can make room in our hearts for his love. And out of that spiritual relationship can come the transforming experience which Jesus called salvation. That experience with Jesus needs to express itself in two ways. The first is moral rectitude. In other words, the salvation of which we read about in the New Testament is not magic, it is moral. Zacchaeus could not share friendship with Christ and remain a thief at the same time. Neither can you or I. The first expression of our salvation is what it does to our moral character. The other thing which salvation means is social responsibility. Zacchaeus made a pledge to give half of his belongings to the poor. Whatever the reason, we can be certain of this: no one can enter into a real relationship with Christ and remain indifferent to human need at the same time. The salvation which Jesus came to accomplish in your life and mine will always express itself in terms of social responsibility. To walk with Jesus is to be involved with people. Zacchaeus is one of those people who make a brief appearance in the New Testament. All we know about him is that he had an experience with Jesus, which made him clean up his life and get busy helping people. And when the New Testament speaks of salvation, that's what it really means. For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Korda. Zacchaeus is one of those people who make a brief appearance in the New Testament. All we know about him is that he had an experience with Jesus that made him clean up his life and get busy helping people. And when the New Testament speaks of salvation, that's what it means. Wineskins is made possible through the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm Father Jim Korda, saying thank you for being with us. Have a blessed week.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I bought her an orchid.
What have I done for my marriage today? I sent my husband a love email.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. But she's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Make a change for the better. Need help? Go to foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
They say America is the land of opportunity, but for some, life isn't so easy. Right now in America, 1 in 6 children lives below the poverty line. That's nearly 13 million children of all races, all across our country. Where do you draw the line and get involved? You can make a difference in more ways than you think. Go to povertyusa.org today, because 1 in 6 children in poverty is one too many. A message from the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.